Coming up on Tech News Today, Father Robert Ballecer joins me to talk about a bunch of neat stuff, including Amazon being near a full release of a new music streaming service. Will Apple's iMessage be coming to Android? Will that be announced next week at WWDC? Also, Sony officially announces the PlayStation Neo and also tells us we will not see it at E3 next week. And the good and bad of two-factor authentication. We also talk about a whole lot more coming up next on Tech News Today.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CashFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today, episode 1532, recorded Friday, June 10th, 2016. This episode of Tech News Today is brought to you by PillPack, a full-service online pharmacy that combines modern technology, convenient packaging, and personalized service to make your life easier. Visit pillpack.com/twit to save $20 on vitamins and OTCs when you transfer your prescriptions. And by Trunk Club, get clothes that fit and look amazing without ever stepping into a store again. Trunk Club will help you create the wardrobe you've always dreamed of with your own personal stylist. Go to trunkclub.com/TNT and join Trunk Club today. And by Blue Apron. Blue Apron will send you fresh, high-quality ingredients to cook delicious meals with simple step-by-step instructions right to your door. See what's on the menu this week and get your first 2 meals free with free shipping by going to blueapron.com/twit. That's blueapron.com/twit. Hello and welcome to Tech News Today. This is the show where we talk about some of the biggest tech news stories from the day with people who are passionate about technology. I'm Jason Howell, and I'm sitting here next to Mr. Father Robert Ballecer. How's it going?
Pretty good, actually. It's a nice Friday. We've got a fire warning, so, you know.
What?
Yeah.
I missed that.
Yeah, it's hot.
Oh.
And windy. And
okay.
Dry. But that's
now
not
I'm nervous because I'm going to wine country tonight, and there's plenty of flat land that. Should I be worried?
Well, if you get stuck, I'll cover for you, so don't worry about it.
Okay, excellent. I appreciate that. It's great to have you here. Of course, Megan is out today. She will be back on Monday, as will I, so we'll have the band back together then. We've got a whole lot of interesting stuff coming up next week. We'll talk about that towards the end of the show. But right now, let's focus on a few of the top news stories, starting with Gawker Media, the company that's facing a $140 million judgment in the Hulk Hogan sex tape case, is filing Chapter 11 bankruptcy today. The company is entertaining offers to purchase the company, and Ziff Davis says it has an asset purchase agreement for 7 of Gawker's properties: Gizmodo, Lifehacker, Kotaku, Jalopnik, Deadspin, Jezebel, and of course Gawker. Ziff Davis would continue operations on all properties listed, except for we don't really know about one of them because it was excluded from their memo specifically as far as how they were going to integrate their brands in, and that was the Gawker site itself. Do you think the Gawker site is just too much of a liability if Ziff Davis takes over?
Yeah, I think not only is it a legal liability and financial liability, but it's Gawker, and everyone associates Gawker with getting sued out of existence now. So when Ziff Davis is looking at the properties, and you look at the ones that they have, some of those are actually pretty dang good. Lifehacker, Kotaku, Jalopnik. You can take those, and some people won't even know that they were Gawker properties, so they're fine. But the Gawker name itself it's worse than zero. It's a net asset negative.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I would have to agree. I'm imagining if Ziff Davis is taking this over, and it's a site kind of dedicated to slam dance talking, about people and exposing people and all that kind of stuff. That's probably not a liability that they want on them. The court ruling required Gawker to post a $50 million bond or face the business being seized. So basically, the site couldn't survive without filing a bankruptcy unless it was successfully able to take on Peter Thiel and the Hulk Hogan case and come out with some sort of a victory on the other end, which is pretty highly unlikely. So a bankruptcy is pretty much just the way it has to be at this point.
And that was the analysis when the case first started. People were saying, with this amount of money on the line, if they lose, that essentially ends Gawker, because there's no way that they could come up with enough cash to settle a suit, especially one for $140 million. In fact, the sale price of those properties doesn't even equal what the judgment is against them. So this is really a defensive move. This is Gawker saying, look, we want to protect the properties that we have because we still think that there are some value in them, especially those that are not named Gawker. And we also want to protect the employees, the writers that we have who have been contributing to these sites. They're going to be able to do that under Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. But it does mean that they now have to undergo a court-approved restructuring of the company.
Right.
And no one knows what that's going to look like, because you can't restructure a $100 million deal with a $140 million liability. So we're kind of entering into a new area of media finances here.
For sure, for sure. Now, I think another thing that this kind of points out, right? Like, obviously, Peter Thiel got what he wanted. He really wanted, at his core, to run the company into the ground, and filing for bankruptcy. I don't know how much further you can expect to get as far as that. I think it was a revenge play, and he got that. But it kind of points out just the influence that money has on, kind of going from to a more broader extent here, the influence of money just on the legal system in general, at least here in the U.S. If you don't have the money to battle, I feel like we're going into the arena. But if you don't have the money to go toe to toe with somebody in the case of the courts, then often that supersedes, let's say, justice in the eyes of winning or losing. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, that is something that I think a lot of us have known for a while.
Yeah, for sure.
We don't like
new news.
Yeah, it's not new news, but we don't like being faced with a clear example of it. This is a case that wouldn't exist if it wasn't funded by some extremely deep pockets.
Exactly.
That being said, there are people who are having the knee-jerk reaction of, this is censorship, this is horrible, you can't do this to a journalistic entity because that destroys the fifth estate. It destroys something that can be a really good check and balance inside of society. But by the same token, you can say, well, Thiel is just expressing his fundamental right to free speech.
For sure.
He can spend his money the way he wants to. He didn't do anything illegal. He gave someone money so that they could continue a battle that he thought was right and just, and it was within the confines of the law. So you get into this sort of gray area where, well, okay, on principle, I don't think you should do this to a journalistic entity, but it was Gawker, and this is what Gawker is known for. And if this had been something like the Wall Street Journal, which does check its sources, which does always go for a backup of every single link that it has, it always makes sure that the story is right. And when it's not right, it prints a retraction. You start to get into this weird, scary kind of debate of, well, what is a real journalistic enterprise and what is not? And now we're back to the blog versus newspaper era of the internet. If you're a newspaper and you do your due diligence, you should reasonably be protected from these kinds of lawsuit. If you're a blog and all you're trying to do is link bait, then you're not.
Yeah.
And that's actually important to the internet generation.
Yeah. I'll be curious to see what kind of a signal this, the story of this case is to others who are thinking about bankrupting potentially media institutions. I mean, this is one way to successfully do it, I suppose, is find and fund a case against it and see where you can go. I guess what I'm wondering is whether, and this goes beyond my expertise, I suppose, or my knowledge. I'm certainly not well versed in the world of law at a deep level. So this might be a great question for like Denise Howell or someone like that. But should the law allow for like third-party funding of a case that has nothing to do with them? You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, it does in so many other places. I mean, look at
I suppose it probably
SEO.
does.
SEO's lawsuit. Remember all that Linux stuff more than a decade ago? A lot of that came from a war chest that was funded by Microsoft. Microsoft settled with SEO for $30 million. That became the money that SEO used to go after all the other entities. When people were like, wait a minute, Microsoft didn't need to settle. They don't actually... There was nothing that was exposing them to legal liability. So that's what they did. Look at a super PAC. A super PAC is essentially a third-party funding of a candidate. So you can't stop this without stopping so many other things that have massive amounts of legal precedence in this country. So is it distasteful? Yes. Can you stop it? No, not unless you're willing to rewrite all of case law.
Right. Upend everything that we already know at this point. All right. So shifting gears a little bit, back in April, we talked about how URL shorteners can expose private information based on the fact that the URL itself is pretty easy to brute force, and that thereby exposes the content that's on the other side. Well, a security researcher took a look at Facebook Messenger and discovered that links shared inside private messages within the app and service were retrievable thanks to an API call that Facebook developers have access to. As long as the person has the Facebook app running, the destinations of those links could be explored. And I don't know, just kind of going back to this idea that we think our links are protected, and doing so, communicating in in the case of Facebook Messenger, in a quote unquote private secured area, let's say, when you're pasting a full link into there, and it gets shortened to something shorter, something that's happening with Twitter right now. Twitter's actually facing a class action lawsuit right now for DMs for the same reason, where people paste a link in there and the Twitter service automatically shortens it. And in doing so, that link now resides, even though it was in a private, direct message, resides in a database somewhere that is able to, tell in perpetuity what that translates to.
I think a lot of the angst that we're hearing about the story, it comes from a fundamental misunderstanding of how the internet works. Pretty much any application that does any kind of work on a link, and that might be finding out if the link is a spam link or if it's a phishing link, because Microsoft will do that in their version. They will keep you from clicking on something that's really bad for your computer, or a link shortener, or something that does, say, posting up thumbnails of things that you get from YouTube. All of those sites and all of those pieces of software, by their nature, will look at a link and therefore make it less secure than if you were just sending it to someone on a piece of paper. That's not to say that that's a bad thing. I mean, that's just to say you have to understand how it works. Don't post links if you think that just having that link is a major security issue. So, this is not a tech thing. This is people using tech the wrong way thing.
And not understanding how the technology works underneath. Having said that, it can be very easy to, and I'm sure a lot of people, this is the way it is for a lot of people, when you have a direct message and you're used to thinking of these things in terms of this is between me and them and no one else gets this information, it's very easy to not think about what's underlying underneath. All you know is that you supposedly have a cup with a line that goes to another person's cup that's up to their ear, and that's all it is, because it's a direct connection between you and them.
And people still think that way, right? I mean, that's the weird thing. People still think when I am DMing someone, and it doesn't matter what platform I'm on, well, they're the only ones who can receive it. Where even if you explain it to them, so, well, your computer is sending information to another person's computer, but in the interim, it goes through tens, hundreds, thousands of other computers. If they knew that, then maybe they think maybe this is not something I should DM. Now, in the case of Facebook, what Facebook came back with was, yes, we understand that a developer can have the Messenger app open, and because the developer has different access, they've got access to the API, they could decode a link that's been shortened and sent through a DM. And you can track someone. I mean, you just look for the developers who are opening and making API calls.
Right.
But again, I think that the better conversation here is when we look at these kinds of services, we have to always understand there's a trade-off between using the service and your privacy. And if you think that there is none, then you just don't understand what you're doing.
Living in a fantasy land. When you're on the internet, there really is no such thing as privacy as far as that's concerned. Reuters today reported that Amazon is finalizing its standalone music service to compete with the likes of Spotify, Apple Music, and Google Play Music, just to name a few. It's a very crowded market at this point. The company is looking at targeting a $9.99 price point per month for the service. Basically, that's the industry standard pricing model. The aim is to rely less on third-party services in its other devices, namely the Echo, of course, which currently has ties to Spotify and other music services. Obviously, Amazon has kind of its own music service. It has its Prime Music service that's tied to a Prime account, but you really only get around 1 million songs with that service, so it's nothing along the same lines of a full-blown, 15 to 30 million song library that you would get in competing services. So this would be a standalone service that offers the whole kit caboodle.
See, this is huge. A lot of people, when they think of competitors to Apple and iTunes, they think Spotify. They might even think Google Play. I am firmly in the corner of Amazon. Amazon is the biggest threat to all of the established players because, think about it, you've got Amazon Prime. Most of us are going to have Amazon Prime. It's just so useful to have it, and it means that we can get the things that we want much faster without having to pay a lot more. Well, if all of these extra services come with Amazon Prime, why wouldn't I use them? I think I've already said on Twitter several times that I am finding myself using Amazon Prime Video more than I use Netflix now. And Hulu's completely out of the equation. Same thing with music. I used to use Google Play a lot. Now I'm using Amazon Music. Why? Well, because every time I make an order and I don't need it fast, I get an extra $1 in my digital currency. I have like $300 in there now.
Wow.
Where am I going to buy it?
That's
am I going to
nice.
buy it someplace where I actually pay music, or I buy it someplace where I have credits for it?
Right.
So Amazon has done all the right moves to make an ecosystem that just it doesn't force you to be part of it, but it's very attractive to be a part of it.
Yeah, and I suppose the difference here, of course, is that you, from what I understand, these would be two services.
Right.
So you've got Prime Music attached to your Prime account. That's like the casual listener thing. And then you've got their full-blown music service, which, from what I can tell, you'd still be paying extra for. You'd still be paying $9.99 a month.
Right,
but I mean,
one's going to lead into the other. That's one of the things that Amazon does really well. Most of us don't know all the free stuff that Amazon gives us. Most of us don't use the cloud.
Because there's so much of it.
There's so much of it. I mean, if there's a link that shows you your Prime benefits. And I'm betting 90% of the people out there watching this right now, if you were to go to your Prime benefits page, you could look, nope, not using that. And there's probably only 3 or 4 things that you use actively, and everything else is just sitting there waiting for you. And that's what Amazon wants. They've spent so much money building out their infrastructure. That's why their revenue and their profit was a joke for years and years and years. Well, that's built out now, and now they're going to milk it, and they're making money hand over fist.
Yeah. Another big part of these, the success of these music services is around exclusives. So I'm, curious to know, I have to imagine that Amazon's going to be able to do this whole exclusives thing the way all the other services are really trying to do to differentiate themselves from each other, because they all have basically the same library, more or less, and same pricing model, that sort of stuff. Amazon has exclusives with its Prime Video content, so there's no reason to believe that they wouldn't figure that out on music too.
I think you're right. I think they're going to do it. I think it makes sense, especially for artists who want to get a bigger audience. That Amazon can give you that. But, and I got to ask you this, because I listen to music, but you are a musician. You're an artist. You actually live this stuff. How much do exclusives really matter? I mean, if I hear blah, blah, blah has the next Beyonce album, I'm thinking, well, within a month, it's going to be on the other ones.
Yeah.
So I don't really care.
I mean, yeah, you're right. For me, I don't know how much exclusives matter, because if I encounter an album that isn't on a service, I mean, my service is Google Play Music. So if I don't have that album, like it's a new Radiohead album and it's not on streaming, the latest Radiohead was, but in the past, that has not been the case. I just buy the album. I don't buy very many albums anymore, so it's actually not a big deal when I have to, and then I just put it in my library, and now I've got it there moving forward, because I'm not going to subscribe to a new service just because Beyonce has a new album over there. But I'm not saying that other people wouldn't do that. I think people would. They'd see that as a sign of what could come from that music service and be like, well, Beyonce's over there and only there. What else are they going to have?
I guess
I'll move
if you're
over
like
and
the
try it out.
Beyonce super fan, you need to have her and even the bootleg stuff. Okay, I get that.
Yeah.
But for most of us, it's just like, I just want something to listen to.
Totally.
And I want a service that once I've listened to 100 songs, it kind of knows what my tastes are, and it will find other stuff for me.
Yeah.
Amazon does that pretty well. The one thing that I will say that they do horribly, their apps are horrible.
Yeah, their apps just
are junk.
Yeah.
Absolutely junk. Just
not
like
as polished.
Yeah, the app, the Amazon Music app, it should be really simple of choosing play me something that's on my device or play me something that's streaming. And you would think it'd be as simple like this or that. And there is a button that says download only, but it still suggests all these things that you can stream. And it's like, no, stop it.
Right.
Don't try to sell me on something. Just show me what I asked for.
Yeah, it's almost like in the case of video and music streaming through Amazon. Amazon's so used to selling you through a store that their interface ends up kind of having a layout of a store as opposed to having a layout as a music service, let's say, or a video streaming service, and it gets confusing from that regard. It's like their design is like 2 years behind everybody else.
It really is. But that's fixable.
Yeah,
so that's
totally fixable.
They just need to get some decent designers and some people who are willing to say, that's not going in the app.
Right.
I know you want it in the app, but that doesn't belong here. Put it someplace else.
Right. Apple's WWDC conference, developers conference, is next week, and the keynote happens on Monday, by the way. Leo, Megan, and Andy Anatko will be covering it live starting at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern at twit.tv/live. Don't miss that. But as we get closer, We're hearing little bits and pieces about what might be unveiled. And as an Android user, one in particular is totally piquing my interest. Mac Daily News says it has a source familiar with Apple's plans that's pointing to the possible unveiling of iMessage for Android. And if it doesn't happen at WWDC, the source says it'll definitely happen later this year. This would be kind of a big deal. Tim Cook has said in a town hall to his employees that Apple Music for Android was kind of a testing ground for bringing other apps and services to the platform. Is this a good idea for Apple? I feel like iMessage is so tied to iOS that it's almost a feature that drives people to buy iOS.
I think it's a good idea, and it's not necessarily a good idea because, oh, this is an app we want. It's a good idea because it changes how Apple approaches the rest of the world. Apple has been very, and rightfully so, Apple-centric. It's, you buy a device, you get this experience. But they're now at the point where the mobile field has really matured. I mean, we see good phones here and then, but they're more or less going to do all the same thing, just in slightly different ways. And Apple's now realizing we will never be the #1 mobile device again in terms of sales. There will never be more iPhones than any other smartphone. There will never be more iOS than any other operating system. And so we should embrace that. Give people who have iOS the iOS experience, but also let others into the, say, iMessaging or into music. From a personal perspective, though, I can't think of anything that I would want to do less than install iMessage on my Android phone. Really?
No, not sold by the promise of iMessage.
Not even a little bit. No. I mean, do you like iMessage? I tried it a couple of times and I hated it.
I have, well, okay, that's a really good point. I have not actually tried iMessage, but I've heard a lot of, I mean, years. I feel like I've heard about it for years, and I want it as an opportunity to see if this kind of integrated at the, and maybe it wouldn't be this way on Android. Maybe it's a pipe dream for me to think that it would be this way on Android, but on iOS, it's really integrated at a system level so that no matter whether if you're using iMessage and you're sending a message from an iMessage account, it automatically knows that that's coming from an iMessage account and sends it over and has, or SMS, and it manages that a little bit more gracefully than any of the offerings that I've seen from Google. I feel like Google has had so many opportunities to get messaging right, and they continue to not necessarily nail it for everybody and create just like a great system-based messaging solution that everybody loves and uses. That hasn't happened.
I could see this being an important step for an Android user who has all his or her friends on iOS. And that makes
for sure.
total sense to me. But when I'm actually looking at the technology, I am much more looking forward to products that have integrated with, say, the Google Assistant. Because the contextual work, that contextual processing, I don't think a lot of people realize how important that's going to be. To have an assistant that, it's not a messaging app anymore. It's an assistant. But to have an assistant that can figure out what it is that you want rather than what it is that you're saying, that isn't just translating speech, but is translating context, that's huge. And Apple's not working on that at all. So
that we know of.
But at the same time, I can say, oh, good, another messaging app, because we haven't had another one in the last 3 or 4 days.
I know. I'm like, yes, I'm exhausted by messaging apps at this point, and I just feel like it's Google itself has exhausted me on messaging apps because I feel like they've come out with, no doubt, I'm really looking forward to the new Google messaging app, Allo, but I don't know. It's just like, it's another one. And you've got to hope and expect that the people that you actually want to chat with are also on it. And that's a big challenge, no matter how you slice it. iMessage comes with a huge...
It does.
A lot of people I know have iPhones. So that gives me direct access.
Actually, do you know what I've been using for messaging more than any other app?
What's that? SMS?
No, Twitter.
Yeah.
And it's why? Because it doesn't matter what platform anyone's on, they'll get that. I don't use Facebook. I can't stand Facebook Messenger because it kills my battery. I don't use Hangouts anymore because Google killed Hangouts more or less. I use the SMS Messenger, but only on the contacts that are in my phone book. So it's mostly family. So I don't feel the need to get someone else in there. Twitter is actually pretty good about being universal.
Yeah. I mean, as with all these things, it's useful if that's where the people you're chatting with are. And
Precisely.
like my family and my family primarily, and most of my friends are not on Twitter. So that wouldn't work for me, and to ask them to move over to Twitter, that would be a really funny conversation. Everybody get a Twitter account so we can DM each other. That wouldn't happen.
No, not really.
All right, coming up, we get our weekly check-in with Sam Machkovech from Ars Technica, shedding some light on a few gaming stories from the week. But first, let's take a minute to thank PillPack, the sponsor of this episode. PillPack's a full-service online pharmacy that'll make you wonder why you ever settled for a traditional pharmacy. They send the pharmacy to your home. This is a pharmacy in a box. Maybe that's what they should call it, pharmacy in a box. With PillPack, you'll never have to wait around for your prescriptions. You'll never have to sort your own pills because, as you can see, they're sorted here for you. Chase down your doctors for refills again. You don't need to do any of that. Their pharmacists take care of everything for you and put it in this box. It's advanced technology that sorts all of your medications and your vitamins by date and time for each dose, as you can see right up there. You can also order inhalers, creams, diabetes supplies, which come in refrigerated, easy-to-open packages. I'll just go ahead and tear off one of these and have melatonin, 3 milligrams. Shipping is always free. Their pharmacists are available 24/7 so that you can speak with them from the privacy of your own home. And if you're on the go, PillPack has truly designed their pharmacy to make your life easier and have very quickly disrupted the pharmacy industry. So they take care of all this stuff for you. So it comes to you. So when you're on the go, that's great. It saves you time. What's great is that PillPack is compatible with most major insurance plans, including most forms of Medicare Part D, and their service is free. That means you only pay the copays set by your insurance provider. So here's what you should do to check it out for yourself. Visit pillpack.com/twit. You can sign up right now. It only takes about 5 minutes to get started. And then when you use our link and transfer your prescriptions to PillPack, you'll get a credit for $20 worth of vitamins and OTCs. Check it out for yourself. It's pillpack.com/TWIT. And we thank PillPack for their support. All right. We welcome back to the show Sam Machkovech from Ars Technica to break apart and, maybe reassemble a few gaming stories from the week. How's it going, Sam?
It is going very well. Just taking a break from my Overwatch addiction to say hello to all of you.
Hello. Welcome to the real world. It's good to see you again. Let's see here. We have some news from Sony today, actually. Sony shed some light on upcoming upgraded PS4 machines. What do we know about this?
Well, news is putting it weirdly because this is everything we've already known, which is that a PlayStation 4.5, a PlayStation 4K is officially 100% being made. We had Andrew House, one of Sony's head gaming executives, speaking to the Financial Times, which, by the way, is just the most riveting source of video gaming hot news, but just really snuck it in about saying that, one, a new PlayStation 4 kind of system is being made, and two, it will not be anywhere near E3, which I will be at next week. There will be no sign or show of the new system. And what he didn't go into as much detail as a lot of other sites have gone with leaked documents sort of spelling out what we are to expect, saying that it's going to be 4K compatible, saying that's going to games that are going to work on the new one will work on the old one and vice versa, that if whatever PlayStation 4 branded game you buy will work on either system. They didn't say exactly what you're going to get if you buy a game for the newer system. Also said that you shouldn't expect something as cheap as the PlayStation 4. Made it clear that it would be more expensive than the current $350 price for current PlayStation 4, which is in line with the expectation that's been put out there, that this is going to be priced at a specific premium. It's going to be out there if you do want to be the soup up your living room kind of person. If you want to spend high because you have a 4K TV or because you're just desperate to have the newest tech. So I have a lot of thoughts about it. I don't know how deep we want to go before I start complaining about why I think it's a terrible idea.
Choose two amazing thoughts. I don't know as a starting point.
It's an awful idea. This is garbage, especially because they have the lead. PlayStation 4 is winning in every way humanly possible in the console war. I truly believe that someone at Sony heard that someone at Microsoft was thinking about doing an upgraded console, which Microsoft's Phil Spencer has totally hinted at. There was an event in February in California that I attended where he basically said everything but admitting that upgraded Xbox One, an Xbox One and 0.5 kind of thing could come along. That the idea that when you buy a new phone, that it still uses your old apps, and that we should expect Xbox to sort of proceed in that way. So I think Sony had a sense that that might be happening and said, well, we got to do that too. And they didn't. They don't have to do it. Microsoft has to do something because their system is weaker across the board, is losing across the board. But this is going to create confusion. If you want to make a video game for Sony now, you now have to test 2 versions of your game. It's already a pain in the butt enough to optimize for a single console. Having to go to the extra grunt work and go, well, now I have to be ready for more RAM and for 4K support, and it can't be crappy on the newer system, and it can't be crappy on the old one. So we got to make everyone happy. It just sounds like a mess. I think it's dumb. I think it's stupid. How many more adjectives do you want in there? Bad idea.
But you're going to get it. But you're going to get it.
I wish you would be more open with your feelings about it, though. Let me ask you this, though. Here we've got the Oculus Rift. We've got the HTC Vive. We've enjoyed them both quite a bit. Actually, the HTC Vive a bit more. But the product that struck both Leo Laporte and myself was the PlayStation VR. The fact that you could get a low-cost, really decent VR experience that came with a library of games was very attractive. Will this rumored new console add anything to that? Will developers be able to turn on more options, or is this just the PlayStation VR will work with either and will give you the same experience on either?
I mean, the biggest thing about PlayStation VR, the reason VR enthusiasts are going to like it less is because it has a lower resolution and a lower refresh rate. The idea being it's going to be doing a fake high frame rate. The idea, you need at least 90 frames a second right up to your face to not get sick. And so PlayStation VR is going to do this by having a little internal doubling. It's going to take your 60 frames a second and it's going to smooth it out as if it feels like I've used it and it does work, and the resolution is a little smaller. So the only thing it's going to really boost is the ability to make a PlayStation VR 2 run better. It'll have more power in it, assumedly. So if they got a bigger screen, or if they supported more native frame rate of a natural 90 frames per second, as opposed to this sort of artificial 120 frames a second. It's a whole lot of garbledy-gook when trying to break that down. But the bottom line is they've locked in specs for what the PlayStation VR set's going to be, which I find didn't make me sick, made me feel comfortable. The demos I played on PlayStation VR already, especially Res VR, which is a remake of a 2001 game that Sega originally released. Really impressive. Mix of good performance and no nausea for a either sit down or stand up sort of thing. It's got hand tracking as well, which Oculus still doesn't have. So whenever that comes out, they have a native opportunity to do that hand tracking stuff that I think gives the Vive the current lead. So again, that's another reason why I think this is stupid. It's just going to create confusion. People are going to look at it and go, do I need the new PlayStation to do VR? And they're going to go, no, you don't. And go, well, what's that for? Go, well, do you own a 4K TV? Well, no. Well, it's just going to be a lot of bad, confusing messaging, and it's going to be like the Wii U, to be quite honest. And we all know how that turned out.
But if you do have a 4K TV, you want it to look as good as possible. But yeah, I guess.
And if they optimize it really well for 4K, then that may be a different conversation, and that small audience is going to freak out. But that remains to be seen. So we'll see. If my mind has changed, that'd be great. But I'm certainly not going to get to see it at E3, is what they're saying. So
would it be better just for Sony to say, look, maybe it's time we start thinking about genning the PlayStation, and we'll do the upgraded specs, or we're not even there yet?
I think that the idea of a locked-in, I like what Phil Spencer said about phones keeping on working with old hardware, but ultimately iPhones have left the original generation, the older resolution behind, and I think you need to wait a little bit longer when it comes to a gaming experience for what it's going to really offer. Are you going to do, for example, HDR support? Nobody knows if that's the case, and HDR, in my opinion, is a way more visually compelling upgrade. If you're going to get like a fancy, expensive TV, HDR really provides some interesting stuff that current consoles can't support. I don't think this is going to get there. So I think that's a bit of they're rushing that sort of thing. No, and people aren't really talking about HDR because they're not seeing it in the wild. But keep your ears tuned to those 3 letters. They really matter. They really make virtual 3D gaming content look incredible and actually pans out in a gaming sort of way. So until then, unless they really come out and say we've got HDR and all this other stuff, not yet. Soon, it's going to happen. This sort of thing is going to happen, but I think this is a little too soon for a system that's really hitting its stride.
And when they gen up, that's when they'll do the next big step. 8K, HDR, all that stuff. Let's see here. Some gaming environments can be full of, I don't know, let's just say colorful commentary, though some might call it rude. And Sam, you called it toxic behavior in your article. Tell us a bit about how Riot Games, creators of League of Legends, is holding its employees accountable for toxic gameplay by analyzing chat logs.
I want to point out that you clearly went to an incredible RTF program for the way you said toxic. That really made me feel like a sports radio. Yes, we are talking about League of Legends, one of the biggest online video games in the world, free to play, 5-on-5 combat. It's known as the MOBA genre. And the thing that really made it tough once it became huge for new players to get in was that everybody in the game was a jerk. Lots of jerks, people typing really nasty stuff. And it's also a game that takes about 20 to 25 minutes to play. So if somebody drops out of a game, you get kind of screwed. And there's just a lot of different ways between how you talk and how you play that you can really ruin the experience for people. And for a free-to-play game, that's really important. You want people to want to play. So they really focused on fixing that a few years ago. But that's not the story today. The story today is that there is a new type of tribunal. Instead of that being applied to the community, it's now being applied to employees at the game maker Riot. Riot got into a collaboration with a group of staff analytics at Rework, that's a Google company, and picked through the chat and gameplay logs for the last 12 months of every Riot game staffer's League of Legends play. So if you work at Riot, chances are you're playing the game that you're creating. And I guess that's something in the contract that says that we're going to pick through all your records if we see fit. And they found that 25% of those staffers exhibited what they considered toxic gameplay. And at first I thought that meant that maybe they were cursing a lot or sort of things that would be very easy to search through in a semantic search. But they did some deep analysis and they were talking about things like passive aggression. Like they were looking for very specific context as to how a player could be jerky in a human way. And also they found that some of these employees were going into games and talking up like the fact that they worked for Riot as a way to be sort of dominating and intimidating and threatening. So if you're a jerk, I'm going to get you permabanned or things like that. And so as a result, Riot used this data in future reviews and by the way, that 25% was for people who'd been fired. That's not 25% across the board. It's not that poisonous a company over at Riot. But they took that data from people who'd been fired, and they applied it to performance reviews for remaining employees and found that there was 30 staffers who were considered toxic in a similar way. They called them junior members of the staff. New to the working world was actually the term they used, and had what could have been exit interviews where they said you're either on the fence and you're troublesome or you should probably be fired. And employees were told that they were one of these two grades and then shown their chat logs. It's basically like a have a seat over here kind of thing, except with online gaming. And the results, they said, other than a couple of staffers who had had other issues and they were essentially going to fire anyway, that's the way they phrased it, most of the staffers just freaked out, eyes bulging, apologies here and there. A few of them wrote essays, apologetic essays, saying that they really were going to change their behavior based on this. Now, the reason this report came out was because this Google Rework team seems to be very big on giving this data out to other companies for how they manage their staff. But I can't imagine any other workplace situation where you would take work company chat logs and have them apply in a performance review way. For example, Slack conversations between coworkers being spied upon or things like that. This is about chat that's public facing. Your username in this game will say that you're with Riot, the game maker, and that's certainly something that it's going to show upon the reputation of your company. So I think that's one thing. But it is a weird sort of future we're looking at in which these sorts of online interactions may hint at bad behavior, may hint at being a bad employee. If you're going to be a jerk in how you play a video game, you may be a jerk in how you work with a group on a team project at your company. So it's a weird sort of way to grab that data and apply it to the workplace, but I'm sure it's not the last we'll hear of it.
His Minority Report is really what it is.
Well, I mean, it's not anything new though. I mean, from the very first online game we had when we were still running BBSs, there's always been that person who will jump in and say, "Oh, I'm admin." Just so you know,
I'm sysop.
Yeah, so you best back off. And those are the kind of people who they will pop up anywhere. That the type of person who will abuse power, especially when they get that first taste of power.
Sure.
And those, I mean, I'm sorry, but they tend to be bad employees. So this is not anything earth shattering, but at the same time, I kind of like to see it because I have been pushed off of some online gaming experiences because people who should have known better were poisoning their own play environment.
Feels like it's one step removed from asking applicants to submit their chat logs for their game experience to mitigate before hiring them.
Riot is actually doing that from here on out. You have to give your username.
There you go.
The idea is, oh, I want to work for League of Legends. Oh, are you a fan? Do you play it a lot? Yes, I do. Here, prove it out. Give us your username, and we'll pick through. They admitted it that they're going to look and check for toxic behavior and grade between a red, yellow, or green rating, depending on what they find in your gameplay records in terms of the things you say and like how you play, whether you quit, whether you feed, like all this sort of stuff. And feeding, I mean, it's like that's like a super nerdy term, but that's like how deep they're going with this.
Yeah.
So, and I wouldn't be shocked to see other video game companies follow suit as more games are about being always online or being services like that. So, should be interesting from here on out to see more of this play out in the workplace.
But that's a good thing, right? I mean, yes, I see it is kind of creepy because you are reaching into the past and bringing up stuff that shouldn't be in the workplace.
Facing.
But yeah, it's public facing. And the other thing is, you can frame it in a positive way, which is if we're going to put you in charge of stewarding this thing that we're creating, you need to show that we can trust you with the power we're going to invest in you. Mm-hmm. And I mean, when you put it in those terms, it's like, okay, yeah, naturally, we're going to want to know what you did in the past.
For sure. Now, finally, I heard earlier this week that Deus Ex was going to get the mobile Go treatment. I love the Go series of mobile games, Hitman Go, Lara Croft Go, both fantastic. But that's not all Square Enix has planned for the franchise this summer. What can we look forward to?
That's right. I got to go to a pre-E3 presentation by Square Enix for the Deus Ex franchise. When they say franchise, they mean it. They started this thing with a giant screen full of all the different merchandising and game opportunities. They're even developing a Deus Ex branded arm, like an implanted plastic arm, like because the game is all about augmentation. And
not an arm as in Division, but an actual arm.
No, an actual plasticky sort of arm. They actually revealed a lot more details this week than we'd gotten at the event. But in terms of games, they had 3 total projects. The first, as you mentioned, was an entry in the Go series. Square Enix has been doing this with its Western games. There's a Tomb Raider Go and there's a Hitman Go, which are very mobile friendly. They're all about touch. They're about pick up and play. And Deus Ex seems like a natural fit. They had a very brief trailer release, which we're showing here, but I got to see a lot more of that. And it looks like there's a lot of really cool possibilities in terms of stealthing around, using augmentations, and having to do this sort of turn-based thing where you're tapping around to move Adam Jensen, the hacker spy character, while the rest of the grid moves around with guards and robots and drones. And there's hacking and there's all weird stuff. The thing that this game's going to have that others have not in the Go series is the ability to make your own levels and share them. And I think that's going to be really cool. And that actually speaks to them saying, we're not going to charge you just for new content if you can build it yourself. And I love when game makers do that, when they say, here's some tools, take what's cool about it, build your own stuff. So that'll be fun. That's coming out this summer. Well, I don't know exactly when that'll be, but that'll be at some point. And then there's Mankind Divided. That is the main game coming out, which had already been announced. We got to see, there was about 18-minute video of the game being played, which we got to see. And we also got to play ourselves the tutorial level. I think it's a mix of some really cool stuff and some not so sure what to expect. The console-ification of Deus Ex was a thing we were concerned about in 2011 when they shifted to Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 for the last game, Human Revolution. And it actually worked out pretty well. It actually still played well on PC. This game seems even more about playing on a console. And I'm an old school PC guy. So I'm kind of concerned about all the way the game seems to be simplified. We didn't see a lot of cool augmentations. We didn't see a lot of stuff that made me get really excited, which is about the plot and about the really cool superpowers. So I'm not sure what to expect there, but I was really intrigued by a side mode that's coming with the game for free called Breach. Breach is an arcade-minded cyberpunk take on Deus Ex, which I think makes more sense for console play. It's sped up. It's about short, quick levels. It's about having a sort of pool of points that you use to soup up your character however you see fit. If you want to shoot. If you want to sneak around, you have all those sorts of options. My only concern, and I'm really hoping they fix this or figure this out before it launches, which is going to launch with the main game in August, is that there's going to be hella microtransactions. There's absolutely a way to spend real money in the same way you spend game money. And while Square Enix Montreal insists that this stuff is all to pay for things that you would otherwise be able to normally unlock, I really do worry that they're going to try and saddle this thing with too many ways to just spend cash to get your power up faster or to revive yourself if you mess up in a tough mission. But it's going to have a lot of focus on leaderboards and about playing in a way to compete with your friends, whether you try to be the best stealth player or the fastest player or the most violent player. And I think that could be a good shot in the arm for Deus Ex that I don't see the main Mankind Divided game being. So it was one of those preview events where a lot of people would say, it may look better. The game's textures and visual problems may look better, but this game's coming out in August. So Square Enix Montreal has a lot to do before that point to really convince me that this game is going to blow me away. There's been a lot of really cool 3D stealth games in the past 5 years since the last one, and I'm really I'm not going to hold my breath for this to be amazing. If it's coming out in August, that's kind of a dumping ground for AAA games as well. But people definitely, there's a lot. The fact that there's 3 games coming out means there's going to be at least one Deus Ex thing that I think people are going to like when all these things come out by the end of August. So definitely be keeping an eye on that at Ars Technica.
Excellent. Do that. ArsTechnica.com. Sam, always a pleasure getting you on every Friday when we can anyways. You're at Sam Red on Twitter.
I am at Sam Red at Twitter. I will be at E3 all next week. I land on Sunday, running straight to the Ubisoft conference, the Bethesda conference, and then the Microsoft and EA, and maybe Ouya is going to do a thing again. I'm kidding. That's not happening.
Yeah, right.
But I will be at E3 all week going crazy, and just keep an eye at Ars Technica. We're going to have a ton of stuff there, and you guys have a good weekend.
Right on. Thanks so much, Sam. Have fun with Overwatch. See you later. All right, up next, Twitter passwords get leaked, and there's something you can do to protect yourselves from this and other hacks going forward. But first, let's take a minute to thank Trunk Club. They're the sponsor of this episode. There are 2 types of guys out there, guys who love shopping for clothes. Do you love shopping for clothes? Father Robert?
I don't wear clothes.
Oh, okay. Good to know. Are you short on time?
I'm always short on time.
Yeah, there you go. And then there are those who hate shopping for clothes. Either way, take heart. Now you can get clothes that fit perfectly and look amazing without ever having to step into a store again. That's thanks to Trunk Club. You just type in your measurements, share the things you like and the things you don't like, and your personal stylist will help you look and feel your best with clothes that fit you perfectly. Sure, your stylist is a professional trained in all the brands Trunk Club offers, but there's so much more to Trunk Club than just that. They're going to pick your clothes from over 80 top brands, ship them right to your door. You get this big trunk that suddenly appears in front of your door, and you get to go through it in your own home or wherever you happen to get that trunk delivered. You keep what you like, you send back what you don't. It's just a really great process for checking out new clothes. And it's really hard to send things back because they're really, really nice clothes. Your stylist takes the time to understand your unique look. And if you live in Dallas, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, or DC, you can stop by one of the Trunk Club clubhouses to work with your stylist in person. Trunk Club is not a subscription service, and shipping is always free, and you have 10 days to try on the clothes. Make a statement at the next big event on your calendar with a look that's handpicked just for you and your style. Get started at Trunk Club today. Premium clothes, expert advice, no work. thanks to your very own personal stylist at Trunk Club. And Trunk Club is backed by Nordstrom, which means they have the highest standards in quality and customer service. Get started today at trunkclub.com/TNT. That's trunkclub.com/TNT. And we thank Trunk Club for their support. All right, another day, another large-scale hack and leaking of passwords. This time, Twitter is notifying affected users that around 33 million usernames and passwords were made public this Wednesday. The site offering up the leaked credentials is a site called Leaked Source. Actually charges a fee for access, and it says it has close to 1.8 billion records in its system. Twitter is requiring that affected users change their passwords in the emails that they're sending out to affected users. So if you didn't get an email, you're probably okay. But anytime I get these, I'm like, I just do it anyways. This time, however, it seems it's possible that the passwords weren't taken from Twitter's computers, says Michael Coates. He's Twitter's Trust and Information Security Officer. Even Leaked Source claims the data looks like it was pulled from hacked consumer computers and then compiled in a database as opposed to being pulled directly from Twitter servers.
Yeah, I actually talked to one of my friends over at Twitter, and the way that he explained it to me was Twitter handles authentication by using a series of databases filled with authentication information. So the fact that they have a list of users on this site that they have credentials for, and they're not contiguous with any of those files means, okay, it didn't come from this file. Because if they'd gotten any of these files, we would see an entire list of all the users inside that particular database piece.
Makes sense.
So it makes much more sense that these were just collected from compromised computers or people using insecure connections, and then they were put together in a sellable package on the site.
Wow. LinkedIn, MySpace, Tumblr, and now Twitter have all seen pretty major hacks in like 2 weeks' time. I mean, we've seen records broken as far as the number of, excuse me, the number of IDs, usernames and passwords that are being leaked within this month. So there's been a crazy month for all this stuff. You have to imagine the big, in the big scope of things, this really affects just kind of user trust in general of not only these services, but of passwords, just as a way of accessing the things that we do. We chatted with Jill Duffy earlier this week about password protection, namely focusing then on using password managers for protection. One thing we briefly touched on is two-factor authentication, and I will fully admit I'm very new to two-factor. Father Robert, I'm guessing that you're a little more familiar with two-factor than I am at this point. In light of these incidents that are happening so regularly, it almost seems like two-factor is necessary, right?
We've been saying two-factor is necessary for years and years and years, but people haven't been using it. And the reason why, it's very simple. It comes down to convenience. Two-factor authentication, when it works well, is fantastic. But when it doesn't work, it is an absolute nightmare, especially if it's for a resource that you need to get access to. So, for example, I use 3- or 4-factor authentication to protect the infrastructure that I control. So my switches, my servers, I have multiple pieces of information that I have to give it. And some of them are pieces that I remember. Some of them are pieces that I am, so my biometric information. And then I've got what people would consider like a little dongle that gives me a rotating based on algorithm number that I have to input. And then there's my phone. So anytime I try to log in, my phone will get a message that gives me a bit of information I have to add in. But if I don't have service for my phone, suddenly I can't get in. And that's actually the annoyance that a lot of people are running into. When they enable two-factor authentication, at the first time they do it, it sounds, okay, this is something I can do. But every time when it requires a bit more thought and a bit more activity, it just doesn't become worth it. I had two-factor turned on my Google accounts, and I actually turned it off because it got so difficult to do work.
And when you're saying that it's difficult to do work, like on your mobile phone, you log into an account and you're logged in.
Right.
Period. So you aren't getting that prompt every single time you're trying to go into your email.
You should. So like on my desktop, it should ask me for my credentials every time I come in. That's the correct way to do it. It should not be persistent, because then what you've done is you've created an environment where if I leave my desktop unlocked and my desktop has access to all the resources that I'm already connected to, I've just created a gaping security hole.
Right.
You shouldn't do that. It should be every time you log into a service, you should have to enter in some sort of two-factor authentication. But none of us would be willing to do that. Can you imagine going from Facebook to Twitter to your banking to
and every single time getting a code? I mean, I think that's the thing that kind of frightens me about it is, am I putting literally a speed bump into my accessing all the apps that I use multiple times throughout the day? So you're talking every single time you would go into the Facebook app, for example, I would, in order for me to check out my feed, I would have to wait for a code to be sent to me to be able to authenticate with and then get in and check things out.
And there's actually a point of negative returns. Yeah. So, for example, if I know that every time I open up a browser, I'm going to have to re-enter my credentials, I just never close the browser. I always have it there. And I tell it, don't time out. Well, suddenly that's a huge security issue that's on the desktop. So it's not as simple as, well, turn it on. It becomes, what is the most you as a user are willing to tolerate in terms of inconvenience to have a more secure experience? And unfortunately, right now, most of us are saying not at all. I don't want to be inconvenienced at all.
Can you put a time on it? I know with LastPass, you can set it up so that, you enter in your master account. This is less of an issue now that you've got fingerprint, reader on your phone. Like before fingerprint reader, I felt like I was entering my LastPass password like 20 or 30 times a day for different things. There is an option in there where you can say once, the master password is entered, keep the gate open for 15 minutes, let's say. Not the whole day, not forever, but just for the next 15 minutes because I'm actively using it. And yes, that's an open door. That's a vector, but it's not as open as just like leaving it completely unprotected. So you end up being protected a lot beyond that. Do you have that with two-factor?
Yeah, I mean, most two-factors have a way to set it up so that it's a bit easier for you. But you get to that point where, like that little button, remember me, when I log in from this computer, most of us are going to check that because it's easier than trying to remember a username and password. So now I have it set for don't time out for 15 minutes. Okay, well, you know what? I actually need 30 minutes. Oh, it doesn't do 30 minutes? Well, let's just turn it off. That's that's the conversation that people have with themselves. Yeah. And so it's incumbent upon security professionals to find that sweet spot. There must be a sweet spot where people are willing to be inconvenienced because it makes not just them more secure, but imagine all the resources you're connected to. So if I leave like my master box unprotected, there are literally like 5 universities and 6 high schools that have a breach in progress. And there's a lot of people out there who work in technology who have the same thing. They have access to corporate resources that really should not ever be unprotected. So again, how willing are you to go through that?
Me? You pointed at me. What? What am I doing? Why are you calling me out? No, it's true. I need to do this. I mean, two-factor authentication, Facebook, Gmail, Twitter, LinkedIn, Amazon, a large list of banking sites, which is pretty darn important.
They all have it. All the major ones have a way to turn it on.
Yeah. I feel like I need to, I hate that I have to do this for myself in order to do it, but I feel like I need to give myself a challenge. Turn on two-factor and all these things and live my life with it for a couple of weeks just to see what my level of tolerance is for this and the impact that it has on accessing my device.
The tip that I've given to people who are very reticent to do this is all of the sites that you don't check regularly but are important, like banking. So your banking statements, your credit cards, even things like LinkedIn, which you don't log in a lot, but when you do, it's got a lot of connections. Those should all have two-factor authentication, and they should have passwords that are different from everything, for sure. Standard security. For the sites that I'm going to be visiting on a minute basis, if not second basis, like Twitter, like Facebook, like Google+, you can get away with a little less protection because you're going to be logged in so often that you will very quickly notice if someone else is in the game.
Sure.
So that I will allow to be a little more open. But anything that has to do with a secured site that has the ability to really mess up my life, I can't use convenience as an excuse not to engage 2- or 3-factor authentication.
So this is the perfect topic, I think, for question of the day, because we've had a lot of fun with question of the day this week. So we're going to continue it. So do you use two-factor authentication? How was the transition from not using it to being less, from being less protected to using it? And I don't know, just in general, what has your experience been? send us an email, tnt@twit.tv, and let us know your experience, and we'll read it hopefully sometime next week. We'll check in on those answers. All right, TNT's fan of the day is Raymond_Wishart on Twitter, who says, and this one's easy, TGIF, because we all understand what that means. It is Friday, and thank God. And it's a nice battle station, by the way.
I do like that, yeah.
I can practically hear the keyboard clicking as you type on it. Just by looking at it.
There's nothing like a clicky keyboard.
It's so clicky. I can tell. Show us how you watch or listen to TNT. Just record a video, take a picture of yourself or your setup, post it on Instagram, Google+, Twitter, or Facebook. Of course, after you've enabled two-factor authentication and logged in successfully, and use #HowIWatchTNT, and we're going to find it. All right, up next, Father Robert's first-hand impressions from the Project Tango unveiling yesterday. He was there. So we're going to ask him his thoughts on it from being at the event. But first, let's take a minute to thank Blue Apron. It's time to get hungry. They are the sponsor of this episode. Blue Apron's mission is to make incredible home cooking accessible to everyone while supporting a more sustainable food system, setting the highest standards for ingredients, building a community of home chefs along the way. For less than $10 per serving, Blue Apron delivers seasonal recipes along with fresh, high-quality ingredients to make delicious home-cooked meals. Every meal comes with a step-by-step, easy-to-follow recipe card and pre-portioned ingredients that can be prepared in 40 minutes or less. You can keep those recipe cards and prepare them later. One of the recipes I picked for next week is actually a Blue Apron recipe from a few months ago. Customize your recipes every week based on your dietary preferences. Choose a delivery option that fits your needs. There's no weekly commitment, so you only get deliveries when you want them. And Blue Apron delivers to 99% of the continental U.S., and Blue Apron sets the highest quality standards for their community of over 150 local farms, fisheries, and ranchers across the U.S. Seafood sourced sustainably, beef is raised humanely, chickens are free range, pork is raised naturally, regenerative farming practices are used for produce. By shipping the exact amount required for the recipe, Blue Apron also is reducing food waste. You're not throwing a bunch of stuff out. You eat what you prepare. Whether it's Japanese ramen noodles, wild-caught Alaskan salmon, or heirloom tomatoes, Blue Apron brings you the best. Blue Apron not only supports a more sustainable food system, it supports happy and healthy families. Cooking together builds strong family bonds. Research actually shows that Blue Apron families cook nearly 3 times more often and, together. That's what it's all about. New recipes are created every week by Blue Apron's culinary team and are not repeated within a year. You can cook meals like spicy Korean rice cakes with snow peas and pea shoots, or sweet chili ponzu, catfish and green beans, and coconut ginger rice. Check out this week's menu and salivate and get your first 2 meals free with free shipping after that by going to blueapron.com/twit. You'll love how good it feels and how good it tastes to create incredible home-cooked meals with Blue Apron. So do not wait. Visit blueapron.com/twit and check it out for yourself. We thank Blue Apron for their support of Tech News Today. Blue Apron, a better way to cook. All right, finally, Father Robert, you were at the Lenovo event yesterday, and realizing that Megan and Ian Thompson, who were on yesterday, did a pretty exhaustive look at all of the announcements from the event. We don't really have to recap all the nitty-gritty details necessarily, but you were there. So I'm kind of curious of your take on what you saw firsthand. There was the Fab 2 Pro that I think I'm kind of most excited or interested anyways in the Fab 2 Pro because we've been hearing about it for a couple of months. This is the Project Tango device. Did you get a chance to play with it at all?
Indeed. And you know what? That was the draw. That's why I wanted to go. You and I were both at Google I.O. And in the Tango
which one of us going to go?
I know. And I just I wasn't going to go. Yeah. I had received the invite, but I'm like, I don't want to go to this. But when I heard that they were going to have the first released phone that's going to have Project Tango, I said I have to. And this was the star of the show. Yes, the Motorola phones were nice. Yes, they had some decent tablets.
The little wrappy round thing.
Exactly, the wraparound thing that they've showed off for the last 2 years without actually ever moving towards an actual prototype. But the Fab 2 is actually a good phone. It is crazy big. We're talking 6.4-inch screen. Yeah. It's a beautiful screen, 2560 by 1440. It's got 4 gigabytes of memory. It's got 64 gigabytes of storage, plus it's got a micro SD card slot, so you can expand that storage. It's got It's 4,000 plus milliamp hour battery, so it lasts all day. The thing is just a nice piece of hardware that, even though it's big, doesn't feel so heavy or thick. It's just one of those, just a sweet spot. But of course, the news was Tango. It has Tango integrated, which means it's got the extra depth sensing sensors. And I have to say, when it worked, it was fabulous. It was incredibly cool. I mean, yes, there's the standard demos of putting a dinosaur in a room or showing what would a room look like if you added a couch here. But for me, what I love is the fact that it's got ultra precise precision. Location.
I like that.
That's a triple positive thing. It's incredibly precise because it's scanning all the points in a room.
Yeah.
Think about all those data points that could go back to any sort of location-aware application. It's no longer he's at this address. It's he's in this room at this address, sitting at this desk next to this person. That's the kind of detail that you can get off of this. And the depth sensing camera is fantastic. I will say, every demo that I saw crashed.
That's a pretty important point.
So you know that it works, but it is still early times, and you will crash quite regularly. In fact, the Lowe's app, the Dinosaur app, the Domino app, the Phantasm app, at some point, every single one of those crashed while I was doing my demo.
Good. That's actually really bad.
That's bad. But that's not the hardware. So the hardware worked. It's just right now the programming is really sloppy. There's probably memory leaks galore. And it is dealing with a lot of data, so that kind of does draw down on the resources.
Yeah.
And
you have to imagine, at least you have to hope that, I mean, when are people getting this in their hands? Hopefully by that point,
right?
They're going to have that stuff worked out.
Yeah, they've got time.
It's a big deal.
Because we talked to the Google engineers; they were there in force, and they're all very happy to be working on Project Tango. They think it's great, but they understand there's a distance to go before this actually releases in September. But I mean, when it does release, it's a $500 flagship phone with the biggest screen you've ever seen, with a battery life uncomparable to anything else, with sensors that eventually someone will figure out how to use right. It's kind of a no-brainer. I mean, if you are in the market for a new phone at that time, I think this has to be one of the front runners.
Scooter X makes a good point. Tango is no longer a project.
Right.
It's going to be really hard for me to not say Project Tango.
That was actually one of the things that they said.
Years. Yeah.
They're like, their big announcement was, it is no longer Project Tango.
Yeah.
It's Tango. And the tech press was like, oh, okay.
Okay. We'll go ahead and remove that from our article. And then
yeah, got that. Let me delete. Okay, we're good. We're good.
Got it.
So it's nice. I mean, when you actually get your hands on it, it makes sense. Because when you're looking at it, you're like, oh, it's a VR, AR video game. But when you actually have it and you start using it, you realize, I could do a lot with this. I wish I was a developer.
Okay, so that's the question that I have for you then. After having your hands on it and playing around with it a little bit, what's the night? I mean, did you have any ideas that kind of popped in your mind as far as like, man, if I had this, I could do this thing?
Yeah. For me, and they had a piece of software that started to do this, but I would love just to be able to sort of walk around the room and have it make an instant 3D model of everything, or bring it up to an object and just hold it up to the object, go around the object, and have it create a 3D model that I can then import into my 3D software and then 3D print.
Yes.
I mean, that you can do that. There's nothing that says you can't do that with the sophistication of those sensors. Now, someone actually has to write the app. But once they do, I mean, this is the dream. I could take this mug and say, you know what, I'd like to improve this mug. I take my phone, I do this like once or twice. It creates a 3D model. I now improve it on Tinkercad, which is a free piece of software, and I print it. So in an hour, I've gone from having this to having the improved version because I've got a 3D scanner on my phone. That's, yes, give me that.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling with know-how and everything, you guys will be doing something along
Leo,
those
we
lines.
need to buy a phone.
I'm sure we're going to get one of those here in the house, I have to imagine. Father Robert Ballecer, always a pleasure getting you on the show. Thank you so much for coming on today and talking tech with us.
I love it anytime I can come on. And this remember, TNT was my home, my first home on Twitch.
TNT was your calling.
It was.
Well, maybe not your calling, but it was...
It was my Skype.
It was your other calling. Oh, boy. Where can people find all the awesome work you're doing?
The best place right now is to go to KnowHow, twit.tv/KH. We are actually working on a couple of new segments for the summer. Of course, we're doing cooling down. We did that last year we had like a cyborg cooling thingy. This year, it's all going to be about cooling down your workspace. So if you work someplace hot, we're going to have a couple of projects you can build to make the temperature a bit more bearable.
Nice.
The other thing that we're doing is we're doing the Green Geek. I am horrible at growing things. I have a black thumb, but We're going to see if we can change that with the use of technology.
Excellent. Yeah. All right, twit.tv/KH.
For Know-How.
For knowing how.
Yes.
How to do things. Father Robert, thank you. I'm going to give you your high five right now. I might give you one here in a second. Monday's guest is going to be Dr. Kiki Sanford from This Week in Science. I'm so stoked to get Kiki back in the show. TNT records live every Monday through Friday at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, 12 a.m. UTC at twit.tv/live. You can take part in the show always by emailing us, tnt@twit.tv. And don't forget to let us know about whole two-factor authentication question. Do you do it? tnt@twit.tv. Let us know your thoughts. You can also leave us a voicemail, 260-TNT-SHOW. You can find the show on Twitter. We are at Tech News Today TV. You can also find this show in particular, download it all over the map. Google Play Music, iTunes, Chromecast, Apple TV, and so much more. Just look for it. Do a search, or you can go to twit.tv/TNT, which is our home on the web. You can find all that information there. And finally, if you want to tweet at me, you can. I'm at Jason Howell. And just another reminder here, we've got the WWDC keynote on Monday, June 13th with Leo, Megan, and Andy at 10 a.m. Pacific at twit.tv/live. So check that out for Apple's announcements, and then we'll talk about it all on Monday's TNT. Thanks to our technical director, Kara Cole, and all the folks who help us produce this show every single day. And thanks to you for talking tech with us. We'll see you all on Monday. Have a great weekend. Let's do it again. It was so good. Gotta do it twice.